Hello.
Hello. We're going. Is your background? Are you making a take on the furry teacup?
I'm not aware of the. I'm not aware of the furry teacup. I just find this teacup very soothing for some reason.
Yeah, I love the tones and it's very kind of soft and.
It's it's a Ursula Vernon painting, by the way. If I don't know if you know her, she's a writer, webcomic author, an occasional artist, but mostly an author now. She does a lot of children's book, and I'm very amused because there's a lot of whimsy, and I love whimsy. And this, for me, this is very illustrative of whimsy.
It's very nice. But you don't remember the furry teacup? That's one of our
I don't know
examples for the claim. Like when we were discussing what is a claim and what isn't a claim, the photo of the furry teacup.
I don't remember.
Oh, I can't believe it. Stephen, I thought he was making a play on the furry teacup there with his background, but I guess not.
Okay.
Could have happened, didn't. But no, I really don't remember it. Oh, was this just a furry teacup, and is that making a claim?
That was one of our examples. Is this a base claim or whatever we were calling it?
Oh yeah. Okay, cute. How to link previous versions of contributed arguments? That's the easy one. The reverse is harder. And what to show to the user if changes were made over time. That's really the important.
To be clear, I don't think either are easy. The fact that there's different ways of doing this, or there's different things of considering to a good way to do it or not is, I think, the topic of today, right? That's why we got stuck yesterday.
Yep.
But yeah, that's what I added as a meeting topic, given that Timothy suggested to continue that discussion from last meeting, but I'm open to anything.
Yep, that's good.
Well, certainly this is part of the continuation. I did not prepare more since yesterday I got caught in a particular coding problem that I want to solve.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing database migrations and they're a pain in the backside, and I decided to write my own database migration tool.
Well, writing a custom migration for each migration that's necessary is not an, it is an option that a lot of people overlook. You don't always need to use frameworks for everything, right?
Yeah, I know, but what I find is sometimes some changes. Sorry, that's totally off topic. I'm just waiting, but I don't think anybody else is coming. Some changes are idempotent, like you can rerun. Like, for example, I have the table creation, which is not, and I'll lose data if I rerun it. And some are like all the constraints, functions, policies. I can just rerun those. And being able to know which is really useful. Anyway. Where were we?
I don't know where to start to tackle this problem. If it's a big issue, I think the first start is always to break it apart. Like I think we need to identify more what external linking means. So I can clarify in one scenario that I think there's multiple scenarios. I can clarify where my original definitions come from as the one scenario that I want to support at some point, which is having full subgraphs of arguments of like claims and supporting claims. And I want to enable authors of articles of argumentative text to augment their text by including an argument graph. And I think therefore it's essential because that whole graph needs to be immutable. That graph, the way the author has written it, created it, and is linking to it from plain text, needs to be immutable. Otherwise, the author is going to be annoyed by, hey, where's my graph? Like now my text it's no longer augmented. So that's one use case.
Full agree.
Yeah.
That's an important use case for me as well.
Which I don't think is necessarily the same use case as linking to a claim. And you just want to link to the most canonical form of that, all arguments for that claim. And I think that's why a bit of the discrepancy lies. So we can maybe go over more use cases of external linking. Like this is one that I suggest.
Let's go over that use case. Well, I'm just wondering why that's a canonical debate thing as opposed to just a mapping tool. If somebody wants to show their argument map and show it to people in a document and link
it's a good question.
Why is that canonical?
But I have the answer. That it's canonical in the sense that even though you only show a subset, it doesn't prevent other people from adding. It shows a subset, but you can add. Like if you show a subset, you can at any given point go to one claim within that subset, and you can see all the supporting arguments and opposing arguments. You don't just only see the ones that you included in your article. So if you want a fuller picture, you can link to the core claim database, canonical database, whatever you want to call it, and there you can see the rest.
And I'll give another use case. It's once you've done this immutable thing, I agree, like seeing how it embeds in the canonical debate is useful, and seeing how it can be updated with the evolution of canonical claims is also a use case. It's a separate but important use case. So for me, they're not contradictory. I want that, and I want the canonical updating.
I also want both, but my requirements of immutability of accepted claims, etc., stems more from being able to support the first use case. That's where I come from. And when I ask questions such as what do you version the entire graph or not, that's what I wonder. Like, how can I link to 20 different claims that are intertangled in some way in one particular point in time?
But that's not the entire graph. That's a subgraph, a curated subgraph. And for me,
exactly. But
saying that this can be versioned is not the same as saying that the entire graph can be versioned.
No, but I'm wondering, like, if you allow things to be mutable and you move a claim from one place to another, or you change you replace it with a better one, typo fixes, all that stuff. If you allow that, how can I, as that original web author that wrote my article, maintain and link to, from a tech, now we are talking implementation details, how can I link to my subgraph and
a snapshot?
Yes, and that's my question, because it's not just linking to a claim at a point in time with a certain def, like you explained yesterday, Timothy. I don't want to just link to a claim with a certain def. I want to have my subgraph, and the way I do that right now in Socrates is I pull in all the claims I want to show. And all of the claims are still present in the immutable database.
For me, a curated subgraph is a claim.
That's a separate discussion. I don't think we have to go into it.
Right. So first of all, what you're saying is that the person is curating ahead of time which claims are going to show in their subgraph. How does that evolve? If people are allowed to contribute, how do you control or know what things are going to be shown or not as it evolves?
So it's immutable. What the author of the article decides to show is what is shown in the article, but that's why you link to a central repository. Everything that gets added after, you can see in the canonical repository, in the central repository. So you can, for example, within the article, you can say, well, there's one claim here that the author in the article links to. The author of the article also adds 5 supporting claims, but omits 20 opposing claims. You can show that because you have that central information. That's not lost.
Okay, but that's supported by the point in time snapshot approach. Because
well, that's what I'm questioning. What do you link to? What the claiming point? Do I link to 20 individual claims at a certain point in time, or how do I do this?
If you're talking about what you're talking about there is a curated view, right? Which means that the blog post or whoever has handpicked the nodes they want to show, and you can assume that they're handpicked
in the majority of use cases. In the majority of use cases, I think it's simply the first people that added the argument. And then from there, it evolves by the interaction of the people reading the blog. They want to contribute, they want to start adding their own claims, etc. That's the use case. I think in the majority of use cases.
So then what you're saying is that the view evolves, but it's still like a curated view, right? It's not evolving automatically. It's like the people who are interacting are going to have to say, yeah, I want this one shown too, and I want this one shown too. I'm adding this to the.
The article doesn't evolve. The article stays the same. It's like you don't change the text of the author.
But the subgraph view changes.
In the central database, yes, but not in the.
Okay, but
not in the external website.
That's what works for a snapshot, right? You take a snapshot, you show. And that's point in time, right?
But
you take a snapshot of the graph.
I understand conceptually, but how do you implement this? What do I link to? I'm telling you the way I have implemented this. My central database is immutable. All of the things, all of the claims that I pull in and show in my article will always be there because they're immutable. They've been accepted once, so they're still there. If you allow curated view where you start moving around arguments and all that stuff and modifying them, what do I link to? Does that mean that?
I think that's a misunderstanding.
Yeah, you link to nodes. You have a set of nodes, each with a point in time that you wish to show, right? Under the understanding that you can't publish two nodes that, you know, it has to have consistency in terms of the time that's being published, and I would have to think through those rules.
That's the question. That's my question. The only way that I can think of, having done this thought experiment, is if you version the entire database. Like every single,
it becomes the super. The entire database is version.
We have that.
It's versioned by an event stream. And so what you're doing is you go and you, at the time you're publishing, you go and you say this claim, and you can look at the map at that point in time, and you say, I want to select this node and that node and that node and that node and that node at a specific moment in time.
Yeah.
And then
if you version the entire database, it works. But that's what I was trying to get at. Like
right.
No, that's absolutely.
It just means, like, from a technical perspective, it means, event sourcing is almost the only way to go. Otherwise, it's going to be impossible. And you need to have snapshots, like maybe every other hour or something, or every other day. You need to replay.
No, there I disagree.
Snapshots are a performance issue. It's a performance decision.
It is. But the question is.
No, but Steven, stop. You keep asking the same question, and we're giving the same answer. And I think you're not hearing it. Sorry. You don't need a full snapshot, because you need a full snapshot if there's interdependency, and yes, there is at a point.
There is interdependency.
But if you take each node as not the node evolving in time, but the version, the identity is the version. So you pick out versions. You're saying, I want this version of this node, and this version of this node, and this version of this node, and all attendant relationships, which are also nodes and are also versioned. So I'm taking this version of this link, and this version of this link, and this version of this link. So you have a list, and that thing should also be, I shouldn't say a claim as such, but it's a topic. It's something which exists in the database, which is version, which is immutable, which has a signature, which has an identity as a version thing.
The question remains, what do you version? Because saying it has a version.
Here's how I did it in Gruff without an event model, event streaming. But I would want to do it with event streaming. And I don't know if the event stream would be a separate structure or the same structure. But the way I did it was, you have a claim, right? The claim has this universal ID that goes through time, right? So that you can link to the claim in general, which will always give you the latest, right? Or you can link to a claim that has a timestamp, right? And it doesn't have to be 100% match. It's like, give me that claim as it looked at 3 p.m. yesterday, right? You don't have to have a node that is the ID of that claim with the timestamp of 3 p.m. yesterday. You can do, the version that was visible at that point. Now,
it's not the claims that are the issues, it's the interrelationships, it's the votes, it's all that stuff that matters.
I'm getting that. Now, how did I model arguments? I had other claims, and then I had the argument connector, right? Actually, the argument was a node, and then I had what do you call the connectors? I can't remember now. In a graph. Yeah, you had these connections, right? So you have the argument that represents the connection between the two things, and then you have these connectors between the nodes that have a begins at timestamp. And if for example, if you version a claim, you create a new version. So you have the argument pointing at the latest version of a claim, and then you create a new version on top. What you do is,
like for each new editor, when do you create a new version?
I'm saying a use case right here. You have, okay, imagine this. You have a claim A, claim B, and an argument that is B supports A, okay? Mm-hmm. And so you have the argument, object, claim B, claim A, and the node connectors. Each of these connectors has a timestamp of begins at, right? Which means like I created this argument in the connections at that point in time. Then what you do is say claim A gets a new version. Somebody fixed Obama, made it capital or something, or something more serious, whatever.
Oh, but
somebody changed.
So the version doesn't change if you add the connection, is what you're saying. Neither
Correct.
the version of A nor B changes if you add a connection.
Yeah. Adding arguments does not change the version of the claim. What you get is you say, give me that claim at a specific point in time. You check if all the connections, if their begins at is before that point in time to see if they were there at that point in time. You can do that query without having to reversion the claim every time you add an argument. And then what you do is if you reversion the claim that they're all pointing to, what I did was I put an ends at on all the connections. In other words, the ones pointing to the old version, that connection ended at the moment I created the new version. And then I create a new link to the new version. So you can follow the graph according to the timestamp and see what version they were looking at a particular moment in time.
This is what I've been trying to talk about for 2 years. I'm quite amused. We're finally coming there. I'm so happy. No, seriously.
And I've been like on board with that sort of thing because I was implementing it. I've probably been on board with it, but yeah, let's go.
I did not realize that. Interesting. But I've given up on having claim IDs. What I have is a way to say, basically, when a claim replaces another, it links to, oh, I'm replacing this one, and you follow the backlink of that to know what are the new versions. So I don't even, you could have a claim ID if you want, but I don't think it should be necessary because anyway, when claims split or merge, the claim ID is problematic. So what's important is how do you navigate.
Wait. When they split or merge, the claim ID is problematic. Just because you have to choose one over the other, is that what you mean?
Yeah, that's
if you're merging. If you're merging, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's problematic, but there are solutions.
There's solutions, but what I'm saying is the solutions. If you look at the solutions in all their generality, if you apply them, you realize that having a claim ID is redundant and doesn't simplify things. It complicates things because sometimes you rely on a claim ID, sometimes you don't. It's easier to never rely on it. Because the logic that
you need a shared claim ID. You need the claim ID to point at the claim. Yeah. But then if it's not the latest, you follow replaced by links, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, but I have another question.
Then how do you wait? My one question to that is, how do you solve the problem of I want to see I want to always see the current version of that claim? I guess you have to follow the links when you.
Because that's a similar question as I was asking. I want to see the new additions. So what you're saying, Timothy, sure, that might work, that you can link to the exact same state as the argument graph was at the moment that the author linked to it, but that's not the use case. The use case is exactly that people reading the article can add their own arguments. They can discuss the article. That's a use case. They can engage with the article on a much more
has to
granular
evolve.
level. So if you link to like a point in time, then
No, but you had two use cases. You had a use case of I want my snapshot.
but it's the same use case. It's the same use case.
Tim
Let
described how
him
to have a
finish.
snapshot.
It's the same use case. I
Yeah.
want to have a
Let
graph,
Steven finish.
an argument graph that the author has written. It's their space, as Carl calls it, that they want their audience to engage with. They want to be proven wrong. So if you link to one moment in time, sure, you can recreate that state, but that means that any arguments added as opposing claims, etc., are not there. Like, how do you decide which new additions to show and which you don't show?
Well, now you're talking about an evolving view, right? There's two separate things. There's a snapshot view and there's an evolving view, right? An evolving view, you would have to resolve via the publisher interface, which is, I went through this with Jamie at some point of what we would have to do for a society library. It would be a special system layered on top, right? Which is something, it's a layer 2, like you were talking about for a layer 2.
I don't think it's a layer 2.
The function.
I don't think it's a layer 2 operation. I simply want to add an opposing claim to a claim that was part of the argument graph of the article I'm reading. But what if?
So I want to discuss specifically whether that should be done or not.
Yeah, that's a fair
but first,
point.
I want to answer the technical question.
Yeah.
The technical question is how do you do it, and how does it evolve on the view, the published view, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I'm saying, okay, you call it a layer 2 or whatever. I'm saying that, like, whoever is a publisher declares I'm a publisher, right? They can. You don't have to have permission. You can just say anybody can create their own curated view, right? And the interface, I would see it as being something like, I want this claim that's right here, you know, and I want the latest version for now, but I don't want to show always the latest version. I want that. We'll do the Society Library approach, because that's a good example. Society Library has its own process for what it considers high quality claims, right? It has its own process for making sure everything's the quality that it wants. It doesn't want to show junk. So what they do is they go through their process and create the claims, or they validate that a claim to them meets their standard of quality, right? And at that point, they would essentially say, include this claim at that moment in time or that version into my view. And it's a publisher type interface. It's like reviewing each item and approving or not to be displayed in your curated view, right? Now,
but you're already curating on top of a curated view, essentially.
No, you're
in this case, because you're filtering from Society Library is what I understood.
Huh?
You're showing a subset of
Society Library is like creating, well, because Society Library, the idea was it would use the canonical debate as its engine, but they would want to show like the COVID map. And so they would only want to show the claims related to.
What are they selecting from?
From the canonical debate.
Which is already version 10 has improvements, is what you're implying.
Right. Whatever moment in time, they're like, you know what, I want to create a graph to show everybody about the COVID debate. So there's been this crowdsourced debate about COVID in the canonical debate. I'm going to create my curated view. I'm going to look at a claim that I find is interesting, right? And it could be that they go there and there's almost nothing there. Then they do their whole content process where they put in the claims to the quality they want. Either the claim's already there or they created a claim that meets their standard of quality, right? They go, boom, import this claim at that version into my
from CDL
curated view.
So they add it to the CDL and then they import from the CDL into that curated view there.
Into their curated view, right?
Yeah.
And you know, these arguments I also want to import into my view. Right. And so what they've done is hand selected their graph. Right. Mm-hmm. Now, what happens is somebody comes along and creates a new version or moves one of the arguments and makes one of those changes that would impact their graph. What happens?
CDL?
Yeah. Somebody in CDL underneath makes a change.
And why are they doing that? What is the use case there? Is this to create a curated
It's
view?
open source. It's crowdsourced. The world is evolving on this.
But I'm interested particularly in that, because what I'm hearing you say is that the reason you're doing that in CDL in the first place is to create a curated view. That's what I'm, the reasons that I think, okay, if it's other reasons, I'd love to hear what the other reasons are.
The society library is creating a curated view.
Yes,
right?
But then why are changes being made in CDL?
Because it's an open crowdsourced debate.
Yeah, but a curated view has to be built. So that means there's steps in building it.
That's what I explained. The Society Library built their curated view. They went and looked at the debate in
that's
CDL.
additions. They added stuff to CDL and then they show curated subset.
And maybe alter and maybe delete.
Yes.
But they can take stuff that's already there. Yeah, essentially the debate part is going on in CDL. And they putting in their stuff or curating or whatever are doing it to their standards, right? But other people are also interacting. They're not the only one. But then what they do is they go, these things match our quality.
Yeah, so they select the subset. That's what I keep. They select the subset.
They selected a subset at a moment in time.
Yes, from the CDL. So at which point are things removed from the CDL or moved in the CDL?
It's ongoing. The moment you have chosen to import something into your curated view, right?
No. I'm just asking, unrelated. I get the curated view. I get it. You select the subset you want to show. I fully get that. But I'm wondering about CDL. Like, do you do anything different on CDL than add stuff? Do you delete stuff on CDL? If so, what's the use case?
You can have curation. Yes, all the curation activities could be ongoing.
And is that curation to create a curated view, or why do you? How is curation from the societal library different from curation in CDL?
Yeah, the problem here is that curated view. The term curation and curated view is not the same word as curation in CDL. They're two separate things.
So can you elaborate on both? So, because that's the distinction I'm trying to understand.
Let's call curation in the CDL as editing. Okay. So we have the curated view, which is the society library has handpicked the things they want to show. That's the curated view.
Yeah, I think that's the easy one. That's the one we understand. But what's the reason for the edits in the CDL?
For maintaining order and quality in the CDL.
Is that different from maintaining order and quality in the societal library view?
Yes, because society library is trying to show a specific perspective, and their standards for quality, they have a minimum threshold of quality. Right?
CDL apparently as well. Why else would you edit things?
No, there's no minimum threshold. Everything's shown, but your standards are that I will constantly improve this. I will continuously improve.
Improve means that there's standards on what an improvement implies. So you're saying CDL also has a standard of quality, apparently. So
it has what I call heuristics for what makes a good debate map, right?
So my claim here is you're doing what society library does, and that's what I call a layer 2 operation. For me, a base layer.
Okay. Let's hold off on that one. Right.
If you can distinguish the two, I understand conceptually, societal library for you is just a filter. But for me, what you're saying for CDL is also just a filter. For me, I don't draw. Somehow you say that your edit operations in the spirit of CDL are different from societal libraries. I don't get that.
The filter in CDL is point in time. The CDL filter view is latest version. Show me the latest version of everything. That's a CDL filter. Now, what is the latest version? Why do things get versioned? Yeah. Because there are people with a curator role, or we'll call them editors. There are people with an editor role who have permission to create improvements on elements of the graph, right?
So what if these curators are society library curators? These people are society library curators, and they want to curate things along the same way than society library does. That's possible, right? That you have society library people contributing to CDL.
I would qualify. I would say that society library, trained society library people are qualified to work as curators in the CDL. right? They would have that permission. And in fact, they could go and massage the debate so it reaches their quality, but there's always new stuff coming in from people who aren't as trained, right? So there's always kind of junk coming in and things that need to be cleaned up, right? And the Society Library wants to show stuff that only meets their level of their criteria for quality, their stamp, right? So they don't want to show the junk that's going on in real time. They want to be able to show as an educational website, for example, here's the current state of debate on COVID,
that's
right?
a question.
This is different. This is interesting. Right now, you're already saying that the CDL curation edits are the same edits than the CDL edits, but the use case is that Society Library doesn't want to show new uncurated stuff. But you are implying here that the type of versioning and editing you want to do on CDL is in line with the type of editing that Society Library wants to do. And I'm challenging that.
It may be different. It may be different. There are times when the standards won't match. There are a lot of times, like the CDL, I would want to show everything. So I would want to show things that don't meet that standard.
How do you do that when you edit and move them? That's the question. Like, what do you do with the?
What do you mean, how do you do it? You're showing it in real time. So people contribute, and they contributed something.
Yeah, but that's new additions.
But you're going to display it.
New additions are easy. We're talking about edits and moving and deletion.
Here's an example. Here's an example, right? The argument editing. It's the argument curation, but I don't want to use that word. Improving the organization of arguments under a claim, right? So you've got this claim and people are starting to throw up different scientific studies they found. Three people show the same study, different things are going on, right? At some point, somebody with editing or curating role can go, you know what? Let's reorganize this under a claim. Studies show that.
Yep.
Right.
What happens with the old? What happens with the old studies?
I would
what does the edit mean?
So I mean, it depends on whether you want to make it atomic or not, but you can do it in multiple steps. So the multiple steps are create a new claim. Studies show that, right?
That's easy. That's an addition.
Okay, that's an addition. You use it you create a supporting argument for it. That's another addition. And then the arguments that are already existing there, you do what I call a move, which it could also be called delete that argument and re-add that argument below.
That's why we get in trouble, and that's why we start to disagree, right?
That's where I think we start to disagree. Then another one that we would do is, and we don't disagree on this, we maybe disagree in the mechanism, which is, these three are pointing to the exact same study, merge, right?
But let's go one step at a time. So a move action implies in what I call an edit, a deletion. So something changes. So right now, you can no longer show a subset of the graph at that point in time, because the latest version of the graph, these arguments are no longer there, right?
Wrong.
So if you want to show the original, what is wrong about this?
Deletion doesn't mean deletion from the database. It means it's got the ended at
the
this point flag.
Yeah, but that's
so you can still point to it.
Yes, but only at that point in time. Only at that point in time. If you at the latest version, the arguments are no longer there, meaning that if you want to link to it and you want to show that subgraph, you need to link always to that point in time.
Correct.
Now let's go to the curated view. Let's see what happens with a curated view in this case, right? Which is the Society Library educational site or the blog post or whatever that said, I want to show all this. And now 3 of these arguments have been moved under a new claim that didn't exist when you created this view, right? What you would get is on the curated view creation interface, right? The management interface for this curated view, you would get notification. You would say, this claim in your view has a new version. Please review it and accept it or leave it. These arguments have been deleted and moved somewhere else. You would want to keep the move thing. You wouldn't want to say they're just deleted. You would want the event to be a move event. These have been moved to this new claim, and this new claim isn't in your graph. Please review and see if you accept. And Society Library could say, no, I don't like these, but I like where they're going with it. And they could go back in and maybe they didn't like the way the header claim was written, and they could improve the quality. And when it reaches the quality they want, they could import the new changes and accept that into their view, right? So it's just like publishing a portal or something. It's exactly that. There's changes that are submitted, and then there's a reviewer to approve and show it in your view.
Yeah, so that's interesting. This use case is interesting because it's somewhat, I mean, for me, if you show a subset, either approach, you can do that, right? If they decide to have a curated view, if you only support additions in a base layer, you can still show that curated view. Where it gets different indeed is if you want to get notified of changes, and then the question is which changes do you want to get notified of? Then versioning, and then that's where you start to make arguments to say, yes, we need to do edits that are communicated to subviews or whatever on higher levels. But even then, I would argue you can probably get away without making this mutable. But yeah, okay, I see that point. Because you understand that if so drop the notification, you can still create the curated view without moving shit in the base layer, right? That's what I'm arguing for.
Right. Yeah, my concern about that is, what happens when somebody creates this umbrella claim essentially for regrouping. And to me, heuristically, that's a better structure for the debate. I know you don't agree that it's
no, I do, but
it's an improvement. Yeah.
No, it is an improvement, but the problem is that there's different ways of structuring a debate, and people are never going to agree on how to do that. That's my point.
Right. Yeah, but then you would need to have, first of all, the heuristics, the guidelines under which, it's a classic case of law, essentially, where you would need to make a judgment, right? It's a human judgment, but you would base it on guidelines and heuristics. I don't know what to do if two curators want it the different way. I would create another heuristic which says if if people are split 50-50, then it doesn't matter. Just leave it as it is, right?
Well, leave both. Leave both, and that's the extreme. That's the extreme I take, okay, right? I leave all of them, and anyone can create curated views, but the popular views are the ones that will surface to the top because they get linked to more, they get used more. Yeah, and that's my sense of immutability in the base layer.
Right, I understand that, and my main two reasons why I wouldn't want to do it that way is, first, I almost feel like it requires curated views to make sense of the debate. If there's too many different opinions on how it gets structured, you have too many overlapping visions of the same thing. So each person's going to have to curate it. The second concern I have is with scoring, which is something that is important to me. And one of the problems with scoring is, one possible attack, quote unquote, on a claim is, and this is where arguments need to be canonical. One possible attack is reusing the same claim in multiple places throughout the graph so that it increases its influence. And that would be the example of the study. This study supports that.
There's other solutions to that than deletion. You can mark as duplicate in a base layer and keep both. You can resolve that with additions. So that I don't think that's an argument.
Well, but what you're saying then is that
but we should let Mark continue at some point. But
instead of the flag being like a timestamp sort of thing, you're doing the same thing as what I want to do with a timestamp, but you're doing it with a flag that says
exactly.
Yeah, I would say the timestamp is immutable. The main difference is that with my timestamp approach, I don't want debate to continue on the old version,
which assumes that there's some sense of agreement that you can find a CDL, and I disagree there. I don't think you can find that agreement, which is why I do want to allow any that's the opening anything up to falsifiability. If you cut off the discussion there and you want to contribute to an old thing because that's why you want to continue, how do you do that? No, you can only jump to the latest version.
And I have an answer to that.
Okay, maybe that's a good point.
But
because that's my main question. That's my main concern.
I'm going to let you talk. I just want to say that gets back to the thing I said we need to talk about later, which is whether or not you should be able to debate on old stuff.
Yeah. And maybe that's like a fundamental disagreement, which is interesting. We found it.
On the one hand, wonderful, you've done a lot of what I want to do, but where we differ, of course, is the whole question of centralization and one truth, right? If you have, and I'm really curious at some of the answers you found, because I'm sure they're useful in the sense of how do you show the previous state if it's been deleted in many ways. But for me, what's fundamental is to have multiple event streams. There's not one event stream, there's multiple event streams. And that means if I'm doing a refactoring, as you described, because those are refactorings, right? It will happen on my event stream. And then it's easy for CDL to say, I'm not showing that because it's not yet on my event stream. It's on contributor's event stream. And if I accept it, then I import the event stream, or I'll ask the user to refactor their refactoring until I'm happy with it. And until then, it lives on another event stream. And on the other hand, you have the ability to know that there's a disagreement, so there's sub-communities that form with their differing views. And this is where it becomes important to be able to say there's not a single identifier for a concept because they've gone through different histories of refactorings. So this identifier of that concept in my event stream corresponds to another identifier in another event stream, or even no identifiers at all. And this is thought to correspond to that version identifier.
What is the scope of an event stream?
It's either a person or a community. It's a decision process, I would say.
It's not a change event, basically, or
an event stream is made of change events.
Yeah, but what is the scope? Which changes are incorporated into which streams?
It's, and this is why I said it's a decision process. Like, for example, it could be individual. I was thinking of making very casually sub-event streams, for example, for hypothetical. If this, then those consequences, subgraphs, and have that on a different event stream. Or, of course, communities will define event streams, or maybe, again, multiple event streams. There should be this is what we accept and this is what we're aware of, which is much bigger. These are, I want to be very casual about creating event streams. An event stream,
I don't know what that means. Like, yeah, what does that mean?
What that means is whoever decides to create an event stream, or whoever community or whichever process can create an event stream. And there's multiple changes. And what I said, when I said it's
let me try saying it a different way. If you look at it through the lens of his federation, right, then essentially it's like each person has their own individual graph, right? Yeah. And so you're making changes to your graph and you're getting notified of changes to other graphs, but your changes are your changes, and whether or not your changes get accepted elsewhere. So that's your event stream, and those are other event streams you're subscribing to.
And I have my own decision process for accepting events from other event streams and mine, and symmetrically. And some community event streams will have some process, say, for example, when a change is accepted by somebody with the moderator flag, it gets auto-accepted, or we need a quorum of acceptation of people accepting, and that's another community process. So that's another event stream logic.
So the scope of an event stream is essentially a community that decides to share the same graph.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. And community, individual being a limit case of community in that case.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, and my viewpoint is different. I just want I want it to be canonical, which is why, I would see it more like a blockchain type thing. What if people are making simultaneous edits? Well, that can produce a conflict, and you resolve it by having a single source of truth. And, blockchain has their solution for that, or a centralized system could just notify that your change is obsolete or something like that.
Yeah, I'm the same there. I also want one that's common to everyone, except that I want it to be immutable. That's the extra addendum I have there. But yeah.
No, but it's, I don't think it's contradictory again, because I want to be notified of relevant, if I have concepts in my event stream, somebody does something to that concept in their event stream. I want to
Yeah,
know
but that
about
only works if the event stream is already shared. If the event streams are not shared, you won't know, and you won't know whether they're compatible, because
that is
you have split blockchains essentially.
That is correct. That is correct.
So that only works if you assume shared event streams in the first place.
Yeah, and for me, actually, I think that assuming all event streams are shared is an anti-goal for adoption. I think people will want private discussion spaces. It's just human nature.
That's what I consider views.
Yeah.
So I want them to add these discussions, and I want them to have them. I don't want to shut them down. I don't want to curate it from CDL, no society library, to go and move my shit when I just want to structure a discussion in the way I want to host on my website. As long as they contribute to a central database and other people, everyone can contribute to it.
And translated in my language, it's they can have the private discussion on a private chain, and then they can say, oh, this is relevant to the public. So they make a subchain, they make a slice, and then they publish that, and then it's published, and then people get notified, and it's part of the global discussion. So it's functionally equivalent.
It is, except that you add the extra step that it can be private. For me, it has to be public, because that's where the true.
No, but you said you allowed private views.
Yeah, subset views. Like you can curate your own. You can say, I'm not interested in all that junk, that the way they're structuring the conversation. I only want to see my structuring here, which is a subset, but all of them are added to the same database.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, and for me again, that's I think that's an obstacle to adoption. I think some people will want some stuff to remain private, and that's fine as long as it's. Yeah, but. The important point here is, I think that there is going to be divergence, there is going to be conflicts and refactoring.
Yes, but I think Timothy disagrees there. So
that's exactly the point I'm trying to make, and it's really important. I think that trying to keep all those states in one chain is quite difficult. And I prefer the idea of letting people doing small resolution at individual levels and then merging the resolutions, building up, basically doing the merge, do the merge locally, propagate them so that the global merge, instead of one database trying to maintain all the states.
That's what I want to do, except, because I don't allow deletions, I can do that because any moderation is a subset view of additions.
Yeah, and what I'm saying, and same for me up to a point, but it's not about deletion, right? It's not about deletion in the sense database deletion, but it's about saying this is replaced by that. And some people may disagree, and as you said, want to access the old one. Mm-hmm. So we need to keep the old one. We need to keep the structure of the old one. And yeah, it's doable. I know all the tricks that Tim is doing. I've done that.
Yeah, right? But is it versioning? Is it versioning, or is it linking to some? Because that's where for me, I don't consider it a version. Version implies that somebody has decided that, hey, the way you're having this debate here is wrong. And who decides that, and how are you going to have people adopt that if
it's not okay?
Can no longer continue?
Okay, we may not have the same definition of versioning, but
suppose there's an edit. I wrote my blog post. There's an edit. There's a new version. I later want to continue elaborating my argument. I don't want to use the latest version. Can I still add arguments to my old version? Yes. That's the question I'm asking.
Yes, for me, yes, obviously.
So, but to which version to add?
For me, no.
Split off? Yeah, exactly.
For me, no.
That's the main distinction here.
That's the main distinction.
And so here's the question, right? But one of the main goals for me for the CDL is to eliminate redundancy and accumulate knowledge collectively, right?
Yeah.
And what you're saying to me is, part of the problem is the repetition of debate that happens in little bits and pieces all over the planet and it's essentially a waste of effort, and worse,
No,
it's
wrong.
partial information that's communicated every time. It's fragmented partial information, and repeated arguments, right?
No,
And
I think it's a false assumption. I don't think you need centralization to avoid duplication. This is where we differ.
well, if you're going back and you want to add an argument to your original blog post,
yeah,
and it was a month ago, and since that month has gone on, so many questions have been resolved. Why do you want to go and add a point to something that's obsolete?
It's not obsolete because it links to this.
duplication?
No, it's not obsolete. The argument structure becomes obsolete at most. Some people might find that the argument structure has become obsolete, but the argument structure can link still to improved argument structures. The key point is that it's not, you can link to like a claim with the whole argument structure at a certain point. That's the way someone edited,
Okay.
maintained that, and still have like clear signs, like ways of showing there's better claims to talk about than this obsolete argument structure here. Like more specific claims, like we talked about, could be one.
There's two aspects to your question. I mean, is it a rhetorical question, or do you want to hear an answer?
Which one? I
want to hear an answer, but
Mm.
yeah, I want to hear an answer. But I do want to say, I do want to ask one more question to Stephen, which is, you're seeing your old graph and you want to add an argument.
It's not old. It's never old. That's the point. It's never old. It's an immutable state, and
Okay,
people can
how
always
do you
contribute.
know when you go to add that argument that you want to show on your page or whatever? How are you being shown that that argument was already made?
The exact
possibly-
same arguments, because it's deduplicated.
Yeah, that exact same argument, and perhaps, what you had was, you had this debate, somebody versioned it by adding some disambiguation, so it's made clearer,
Yeah.
and then somebody posted that argument up over here, that all these things aren't on your page.
Well, the main claim you land on will, like Marc-Antoine has made great suggestions for, like, hey, that's better, more specific phrasings. This claim has been turned out to be ambiguous. You might want to talk about these. Stuff like that also lives in the central database. And then you can see, well, this claim here you're looking at right now, 10 people believe in it. There's like 10 more specific versions, which hundreds of people believe in it. We suggest you go there. That's how you link, but it's still the same database.
But then you're going to have to just reconfigure your whole graph, because you're going to have to start pulling in things that are off your graph elsewhere that have some sort of vague connection to what you're doing, as opposed to that one thing getting improved and versioned over time. Arguments being added to that one thing.
That's fine. At least the original old article is still intact. If people want to comment there, they can. If they want to go to what seemingly now is more relevant, they can.
I mean, why would you go to the old arguments, right? I mean, most of the time you have the old snapshot, and you will want to keep updating it as the events get updated. So you will say, this was the original back then, and here's the new one with new arguments. And if you do something new, you'll probably want to do it on the new one. If you do it on the old one, basically, maybe you haven't had time to update the old one. And then you can do it later with the merge, and it's fine. The question is, when you look, one second, when you look at the old version, you'll be offered, hey, do you want to see an updated view? And then you would say, this is what it would look like with all the updates applied, including updates to older branches, because it would show a kind of merged view. That's important.
One pause there. You would have to know what is an update action as opposed to just a general add action. You know what, something that was an update as opposed to just a new claim or new argument that's outside the scope of your graph because you didn't care about, right?
That's correct. But that's update here. No, that's correct. Absolutely. That's pretty easy to say. When I say this argument is a new version of that argument, that's an update and not an add.
I wouldn't say new version. I would say, like we talked about, this is more specific. This resolves ambiguity. Then I'm with you. And those are additions.
Well, no, but I'd also want to include refactorings. Refactorings are a case where I'm saying, here's a bunch of arguments that replace a bunch of other arguments. Yeah. Now, that said, this is actually one case where it may be necessary to go back to the old argument. It's like, you know what, I accepted this refactoring, but after all, this argument that was refactored, there was something that was important about it that I want to go back to and say why I didn't want this in this original form, and maybe
to resolve
I'm not
disagreement with the refactoring, etc.
Exactly, and this is why it's important to be able to go back in time and still work on the original branch. And then
going back in time is one solution, right?
Well, not go back in, but do a new branch for no point, and then you could say, okay, now there's a conflict between this thing on the old branch and this thing that's been refactored, and that means we need a merge operation if we want to resolve the branching. And this is something we need to be aware of. It's something that does happen, conflicts happen, and that means
you want a mutable core database. And that's one, because all of these are super difficult questions for me. If you have a core immutable database, you can just modify your view. Like if I'm the block author and I agree, I want to link to a newer updated claim, you can link to a newer updated claim. You can edit your post, which is essentially a subset of the view. It's a curated view.
It's not if you have an immutable claim database, it's if you have access to the global data, which is entirely possible in a federated view. It doesn't have to be in a single database. I think that's totally misconception.
But what is a conflict in a global database? A conflict in global database only happens if you have branching. So you share the same event stream, you decide, no, I disagree with this event stream, I don't want to add that claim, for example, is what you're saying. So I continue on a different event stream somehow that spins off.
Yeah, but then you,
and then there's like additions of,
you'll keep awareness of the conflict. The idea is to materialize the conflict. The moment you do the branch is perfectly not the problematic moment. The moment that's problematic is when you detect the conflict. And then you'll have to know, okay, this branch is in conflict with that one, and maybe that conflict needs to be resolved.
But
or not
all branches by the very definition in conflict with one another? That's why it's a branch.
No, that's not true. Not all branches, like think of GitHub. Not all branches have conflicts in the merge.
Yeah, so if they only have additions, which is what I'm saying, then you can merge them.
Or if they have subtractions elsewhere in that are to things that were not edited in the other branch, and so on and so forth. There's many cases of non-conflicting branch.
Yeah. But all of them assume if you centralize it, you never.
Yeah, and that's a mistake.
No. All of these assume that all conflicts at some point are resolved or not. What happens if you don't resolve the conflict? What I'm saying is the only way you can guarantee that no conflicts need to be resolved is by never supporting deletions on a base layer.
And I'm saying, I'm not supporting deletions on the base layer, I agree with, but for me, not resolving conflicts is not a goal. It's almost an anti-goal. Being aware of conflicts is
no, but there are no conflicts. If you don't support deletions or edits, there are no conflicts. That's what I'm saying. You're assuming you can, and you can decide to adopt them or not. Then conflicts arise. Like, so what?
Okay. I see what you're saying.
Branches.
I see what you're saying. Okay, there's different definitions of conflicts here. You're right. In a purely immutable structure, whether federated or centralized, there's no conflict. Still, there are conflicts. I mean, even if you don't delete, even if you keep the whole history, you can have modifications on two branches such that a merge is impractical or impossible or contradictory. In our case, we have notion of contradictions. So we can make contradictory statements on two branches, so those branches cannot be merged without conflict, even though there's no deletion, no blah, blah, blah. And that's what I mean by conflict. It's an extended definition of conflict from the GitHub one.
Yes,
and
so you now have two separate event streams, right?
You have two separate event streams. You've made addition, maybe even just additions on both, but the additions entail that there's no logically consistent merge. That's a perfectly valid situation. And then what you want to know is my viewpoint is this is not necessarily something to be resolved in the sense there should be one chosen over the other. It's what we need is an event, probably on both, saying, hey, by the way, this is conflictual. This is, and you need to be aware that this position is conflictual with this other one. You may want to resolve it. You may want to refactor it. You may want to do all kinds of things to make merge possible, to make the views potentially consistent.
Yeah, but isn't the very nature of the conflict that you don't want to incorporate the change? So you choose not to incorporate the change, hence you branch off.
Exactly. But the point is, can we, and I think there needs to be a social mechanism to encourage, how should I put it, the agree to disagree refactorings. Like if I say this is true, this is false, and if I have totally different definitions, there's a point which is, okay, can we say this is the part on which we agree and this is the part on which we disagree? And so I want blue, you want red, but we've done the refactoring so that we've defined a core on which we agree. We've defined these two things on which we disagree. And then I can incorporate here something I disagree with, but it's in my graph.
But
which
event stream are all of these things being, because you split off, like you have two event streams now. Like why does this live, everything you're saying now?
Either in both. Whoever accepts the necessity of finding this meta agreement, agree to disagree agreement, and whoever doesn't, frankly, is not that important. But whoever is willing to engage in dialectics, and the point is, I think it's possible to achieve an addressable global state, and such that I can say, even if the other person doesn't do it, I can say, well, this concept in that stream corresponds to that concept in my stream, which I disagree with, but it still exists in my stream as something. But
when each conflict that arises gives creation the potential new event stream. So for each event stream, you're gonna check off all. I'm still very confused by this.
No, it's not a new event stream. It's just, it creates new events which are about no in both event streams, in the both pre-existing event streams that say, hey, there's this first, this conflict exists. B, someone may attempt to refactor it so that instead of
but the conflict refers to nodes that exist at a certain point in time in both event streams. Well, in other words, like the same event stream. Once you do stuff,
yeah,
you split off. You can no longer resolve any further conflicts, right?
Wrong. First,
only the nodes
are, you're not getting any events on the non-accepted node, which means you're suddenly no longer getting a stream of arguments that have been added.
Exactly.
Wrong assumption.
Okay, why?
Because you're dealing with the same concepts and you subscribe to the concepts being modified in any event stream, or any new event on those concepts on any event stream.
That takes me back to the question: what is the scope of an event stream? Because now it doesn't sound like a shared database of claims. It sounds like your streams are more like related to nodes. You have a stream per node, but then which? No.
I don't have a stream per node. That's a misinterpretation.
I'm just trying to figure out which events you get or not. Like, what are the event streams that me as a system I will get, and which ones not?
There's a difference between getting events and getting notifications. You should, okay, here's how I see it, and still working on some of that, but I think the basic intuition is I have an event stream, I'm working on certain topics, certain concepts. I want to know that you are also working on those concepts and that you have new events about these concepts. Or at least, let's first be aware that you're also working on these concepts so that I can choose to subscribe to your event stream. Or I could, and I should know that, hey, Tim started working on the same concept, so I should be notified. Here's a new branch working on those concepts. And then
isn't a concept like the most abstract term? It can be an entity, it can be a claim, it can be a...
Yes.
So how is this not an event stream per claim? Which you just said.
Where do you get the event stream per claim? I really don't get it. I said one event stream per person.
You said I'm interested in events about a topic. How do I subscribe to events of a topic?
You subscribe, that's the point. You do slice subscriptions. I say you declare to the global, to the federation, here's my event stream, and you may notice that I'm interested in those events, okay? And those concepts, because that's what I'm dealing with in my event stream, because those are the concepts I care about. I'm working on in my event stream. So the federation should be able to tell me, hey, look, here are people who have event streams dealing with those same topics. So I can know I should subscribe to those, and then I would be notified, hey, here are events containing new claims from those people on their event streams. And then I can choose, I got this notification, and then do I believe the claims in those events, and do I integrate them in my event stream or not?
Okay, but how do you do like an edit of an edit? So you subscribe to an entity, there's a suggested edit for the entity, and later another suggested edit for the previous version of the entity. Like, what if you don't incorporate the first one? What happens with the second one?
You are aware of it, but it's entirely possible that you cannot incorporate it without incorporating the first one.
Exactly.
Or not. It depends.
It depends.
It depends.
You get incompatible streams.
It depends if it's a conflict. It depends if these changes are in conflict with one another. And that's resolvable, right? I can know maybe the second event is independent of the first, and in which case I can accept it independently or not.
Yeah, but in a real world use case, I really think that you'll end up with everyone creating their own graphs, and you'll be burdened with 20,000 notifications, which is part of the reason I stopped using Kialo.
My general question is, what skill level are you expecting of your users, and what time dedication are you requiring of them to participate in this network? Because my idea is it should be as easy as a tweet to just go and understand what's going on and maybe contribute something. And this sounds like you need to be like, if you've ever done a merge in Git, you understand that it's a special role with dedicated time just to be able to handle merges. And I don't think that's the average person willing to do
this is
that.
of linear, simple text. This doesn't even have, well, no, it has structure, I guess. Code is structure.
It has structure. Well, this is why I'm so much thinking.
I think it's fair to say that a merge on Git is easier than what we're talking about.
Both easier and more complex, because I agree in some ways it's more complex. In some ways, if you're dealing with nodes and additions, nodes and relations, and additions of nodes and relations, there's very few real conflicts, right? There's logical conflicts, which are one thing, but there's very few structural conflicts.
There's very few conflicts as long as there's only additions. But I'm interested in the edits and the removals and the
no, I agree, and so am I. What I'm saying is, even refactorings, when you think of refactorings, what you're doing is you're saying this node is now merged into or has been subsumed into this node. And so any edits to that node, well, we should look at what would be the equivalent edit on the merged node.
I'm also very concerned about creating bubbles in this situation, right? Subscribe to the Q feed, right? Only get your events from the Q stream, right? That's something like this. I have to get back to work, but yeah, I understand. I understand that the three perspectives here. I think we need to talk more about, or I'd like to talk more in the future about the value of editing old stuff, because I still disagree, because I think that isn't an accumulation of knowledge. And
yeah, that's definitely something to put on the backlog. I agree, because it's the main reason why we differ. I think the federated part, the main underlying reason might be private versus public, potentially.
I think it's more complexity and the burden on the average user and the fear of bubbles are my main concerns.
Well, that's your reasons against it. My reason for it is that I don't think it's easy to maintain the different viewpoints in a single centralized database. And I think it's actually easier. It's actually easier to do the merges with multiple event streams than in a centralized database, frankly. to say
in a less how do you say, not less radical, but less extreme, and definitely down to earth version of what you said. And this applies to both your approach and the immutable everything everywhere approach. One of the advantages to that is Society Library has shown me that there are certainly very good reasons for wanting to see a debate structured one way or another. And it could just be like, are you taking the scientific perspective or the political perspective or something like that? It comes down to how do you regroup the arguments, essentially, right? Yeah. How are you going to regroup these things? Yes. That is the main flaw in that aspect from my...
And that's why I'm more interested in multiple graphs with bridges and correspondences versus one graph to roll them all.
Yeah, I see all perspectives, and I see that the trade-off is very huge. That's the problem. I don't know how to make headway on that. But okay, let's do it another day. I have to get back to work.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye.
Good meeting. See you all.
See y'all.
Thanks, guys.